Welcome to Streams of Income with self-help author Ryan Rieger. For the next hour, you'll hear proven methods for how to live the multiple income streams dream. Ryan is passionate about helping others discover their gifts and start their own business. He's published 5 books, and his courses and group coaching programs have changed the lives of thousands of students all over the world. Ryan's books include Private Label, The Easy Way, Finding Your Grace Place, and his latest, Streams of Income. And now, here's your host, Ryan Rieger.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Streams of Income radio show. I'm your host, Ryan Rieger, and today we're chatting with my good friend, Eric Nevins. He is the owner, the founder of the Christian Podcasters Association. Stephen Hibbert joined me on this interview. We just had a great conversation about podcasting, about how to get started. He went over the 5 tips for podcasting, mindset, message, mechanics, marketing, and monetization. He expanded on those. It was just so good. I took a lot of notes in this episode, but if you're thinking about starting a podcast, do it. There is so much opportunity in the podcasting space, and honestly, it's not even that competitive. Stephen and I went to PodFest a few weeks ago, and they talked about the number of active podcasts compared to what you see in the Apple catalog is just so little. Like, the podcasting space is a great space for you to stand out, especially if you have a niche podcast. But it's a great way to get out your message, to meet cool people that you'd never have an opportunity otherwise to be to get in touch with. And it's been a game changer for me in my business. I've been doing this now for 3.5 years, going on 4 years in August. But I love this. I love podcasting. It's been a great way for me to learn my audience, meet new people, and to share this message. But I think if you are interested at all in starting a podcast, growing your podcast, you are going to want to listen to this episode. Here it is. Eric, welcome to the show, man. So glad to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
This is so awesome. So, Eric, your name has come up a couple times from people that I know, and they said you need to reach out to him. And we met you at PodFest in Orlando just a few weeks ago, and now we're working together.
I know, it's amazing. That's why I go to those things, because it's fun.
It's so cool. Well, let me because I love hearing people's stories. Let's talk about yours. What have you been doing before podcasting, and how'd you get into all this?
Yeah, so I'll give you the outline, and then we can dive into wherever you'd like to go. So I really I grew up in sort of a Christian family, but I always had this question about how do we grow spiritually, which led me. As an American evangelical, we have kind of one thing that we say to each other, which is whatever your problem is, doesn't matter what it is, read your Bible and pray. So I went to college to learn how to read the Bible, and then I went to seminary to learn how to pray. But I graduated at a time when, right in the middle of the downturn, so a lot of the jobs that I could have gotten or that I would have wanted to have gotten weren't in existence anymore. And so I ended up staying in the financial world for about 13 years. And that's where I discovered podcasting, and I started to realize I could use podcasting to contribute to the kinds of conversations I wanted to have. And so I started my own, and then I started Christian Podcasters Association on a whim a year later, thinking we just need a place for Christian podcasters to get together. Yeah. Hoping that maybe someday it would turn into a business and some of the stuff that I do today. And now that's where we are.
Wow. Well, what was your first podcast?
So, my first show is halfway there. Is the one that I still do today. We're about 6.5 years in. I started on June 6th, 2016, but it took me 2 years to get there because I had a lot of mindset issues to overcome, and I was afraid of it not being perfect. I tried a bunch of other things. Actually, I said to my wife just this week, I said, did you know that it has been 10 years since I took that coaching course? I bought a coaching course from a guy named Mitch Matthews in 2013. This is like the golden age of internet marketing, right? You could send somebody a few emails and they'd be like, hey, let me give you $2,000. Well, I did that. But I learned some very key things like asking questions, how to do that, and some cool stuff, and a lot of good things about coaching that I still use to this day. But it's been 10 years. But I tried a couple of those kinds of things where I thought, if I just do it, then I will, go ahead and it'll be amazing and people will just flock to me. Turns out that's not exactly how it works.
That's not true.
No, it's not true. So it took me a long time. So I was really kind of gun shy when I started the show. But anyways, we started in 2016, and Halfway There really tries to tell the story of the Christian journey. I like to say it's longer, deeper, and wider than you've been told.
Yeah. That's awesome. Wow. So we got Steven on here too, and he always loves to jump in and ask good questions as well. But yeah, so tell me, like, when how big the Christian Podcasters Association that you have, this is a large Facebook group now, and you've actually turned this into a month. We want to talk about the membership you got, the podcast tour, which is so super cool. I see tons of opportunity for that. How many Christians do you have in that Facebook group now?
Yeah, so we're right at about 3,200 at the moment.
Wow.
So yeah, which is amazing. Now it's kind of interesting because Facebook groups, like I don't know how many people are still active. We've got some of that.
Sure.
There's a lot of podcasts that have stopped over time. So but I think at least half of them, maybe closer to 2,000, are active at the moment.
Yeah. That's good. Since you do a lot with podcasting, obviously you train people. I want to get into like some tips that you have, because that'll be super valuable for for somebody getting started, how to grow their podcast.
Yeah, do you see podcasting as the best way to just get your message out? Or do you feel like it is like what you were saying, is just like a conversation, like you wanted to have those conversations? Is it the best way to just have those conversations and being able to reach out to people? I know me and Ryan have used the podcast to get in front or talk to people that would probably not give us the time of day. Right. So it seems like a good leveraging tool to have those conversations.
Oh, absolutely. To talk to the people that you want to talk to. So one of the things I did not anticipate when I started my show was that I would be able to talk to people that were my influences and that were people that I would otherwise have no business getting on a call with, right? So one of the ones, I'll just tell you a story, is Os Guinness. Do you guys know Os Guinness?
Yes.
He's like he's an author. He's kind of an Irish, political philosopher guy. I read a book by him. One of those things I tried was a political blog. Don't ask me why. It's hard. But I got this book from InterVarsity Press, which I didn't even know I could do. So they sent me a free book. I read this book by Os Guinness, and he makes this argument about how it doesn't matter what is happening in our culture or what is happening in government if nobody's willing to have the integrity to the character to obey whatever the law is on the paper, right? That obviously matters more than what the actual law is, which made me realize that stories, right? So I started asking myself the question, how do you actually change somebody's character? Well, you do it by stories. This is why so much of the Bible is stories. So much of the way that when people want to influence other people, they create a story to share. This used to be, in a tribe, it'd be around the campfire at night. Every night you would tell the stories of your ancestors in some form or another.
Right.
So this is how character is shaped and changed. So when I started my show, I did it the way I do, which is asking people questions about their story, diving in, hearing about their experiences with God over both the good ones and the negative ones and all that. Mm-hmm. Because of that realization, well, eventually I got to interview Os Guinness, and I've had him on my show twice, which I never would have imagined, right? Like he tells me a story. His parents were missionaries in China during the Second World War. So he remembers as a young child, like fleeing China during that, right? Amazing. One of his ancestors was brought to Christ by John Wesley and prayed for 10 generations of her family to serve the Lord. Well, Os Guinness is one of those guys, right? I never would have heard a story like that without my podcast. So when you ask about like
incredible
stories, having conversations, and your message, I think all of those are together. I think you get to have the conversations that advance your message. You get to network with people. I was not a networker when I went to what I affectionately call bank jail, where I would go to a 6x6 cell and stay until they told me I could go.
Your 9-to-5 job.
Exactly. Like, it was just, I was miserable, and I was not, I just didn't, it wasn't where I belonged. There's plenty of other people that's fine for, but that wasn't for me. And I felt like I was really trapped. So I didn't care about networking then. But when I started podcasting, all of a sudden I'm like, who else could I talk to? Who else is out there? I network with with publishers and all kinds of people that I just otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity to. I just interviewed Tom Rainer, who I got this book. I believe it's his new book. He was the president of Lifeway like for a long time.
Oh my goodness.
How could that happen? How could I get to talk to this guy? And I asked him some questions. I was like, that I wanted to know. That I'm like, hey, when we talk about discipleship, what about this? It was kind of amazing. It was a lot of fun.
It really is.
Yeah, I guess I was asking. Oh, sorry.
No, go. Yeah.
I guess I was asking because I think a lot of people, when they think podcast, they go, "Oh, this is just another thing to get my message out there, and it's a marketing tool." But it as me and Ryan have been doing this and seeing Ryan's impact, it is a unique piece to your business to build network, to build opportunities, to build those partnerships. Even what we're doing with you now is very interesting. It just came from a conversation, but it's where are you having those conversations? The podcast allows you to have those conversations in a setting of the podcast, but you're really having a relationship building conversation on that podcast. Even though if you're asking those questions, they might have something to promote, but it does seem to be more powerful and impactful for those partnerships, relationships, and the conversations than to get your message out. So I just want to say to Ryan's audience, that's Streams of Income, or for Kingdom Dreamers, whoever we use this, the message piece is an important piece of podcasting, but I think the more impactful piece for you as a person is the conversations and people you'll get to meet through this. And I'm excited to have you on because I think the network piece of it is even more exciting.
Well, so I think, and I say this often, I think podcasting is more about, or at least as much about, personal growth as it is about audience growth. And I think it kind of, you have to worry about both of those things. So what I hear you talking about is as you're developing, those relationships with the people that you're interviewing, you can, it's like I can just learn from a ton of different people, with how, and they're happy to do it. They're happy to show up and I start asking questions of what about this?
Okay, let me ask you this. Why? I know the answer, at least I know one of the answers, but why, if I'm on Oz Guinness or I'm any major person in our space, why would I want to be on a show that maybe I've never heard of before, doesn't have even like my show, Streams of Income? I get maybe 400 downloads a week, so it's not huge, but that's in the top, I don't know what percent that is, even that, but it's not, I'm not Joe Rogan. So why is somebody going to come on my show if they're way bigger than me?
Well, because you have the opportunity to reach a niche audience, right? So the people who want to listen to Streams of Income want that kind of content, right? They're interested in business. They're interested in how do I make passive income or whatever, all those kind of things, topics that you talk about. So somebody who has a large audience and can come and speak exactly to the people that they're trying to reach, that is unbelievably powerful. I've had authors say to me that, so one guy says to me, he goes, he can be on the radio in like Pittsburgh, I think it was his example, because he reached 400,000 people. Theoretically, right? You don't actually know. Sure. So hopefully, say the reach hat is 400,000 people and not see a single bump in his sales, but he can go on a handful of podcasts that are targeted to the exact people that he wants to reach and see that bump when they start to publish and see that sales, people are starting to buy it because they heard about him. So I think you have less of the restrictions that you have on terrestrial radio, and you have more highly targeted niches. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, Stephen, you're into hunting a little bit, so it would be the difference of like a shotgun versus a sniper rifle, where a shotgun is not quite as accurate, but a sniper rifle you can go right in and go after the target that you're looking for.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever thought of it like that, the targeted piece, but especially like the personal growth and the audience growth and the business growth. You get to pick and choose. If you're on the radio, you don't really know who you're hitting. You are just shooting a shotgun out there. But as soon as you get on a podcast, you have a pretty good understanding of like who that person is, who their audience is, and you can even ask that host. But it is interesting that it is kind of reverse. Like you're building something to attract larger influencers to come to you, whereas like if you are just trying to talk to one of those people, like they're not really going to give you the time of day because they're so busy, but they will come to you because now you have something to offer. You have that in with that audience, which is very unique. I don't know till we went to PodFest, like I would have thought of any of these things. I was just like, oh, I know podcasting is just another marketing ploy to me. But now I'm like, oh, there's way more to this. It's very impactful of having a podcast as part of either your business or just personally. I was thinking like I should just start a podcast because there's a bunch of people I want to talk to that aren't really talking to me, but I can at least leverage. Oh, I have a podcast.
Totally.
Come on, talk to me.
So true.
Totally. And I would recommend it. And so I think you become media, right? You become
true.
media. And so you have to
And
think of yourself.
media has access. You go to a ball
That's
game and
right.
you see those guys that wearing the media tag and they're down on the court, you know?
That's right. You know what? I'm telling you what, I'm trying very hard to get in someplace. Like I live in Colorado, so I want to get in at the Rockies somewhere, you know, so I can, or I'm a Cardinals fan. I thought about starting a St. Louis Cardinals podcast just so I could talk about
Media
them
access.
For sure.
and interview players and media people and like, just because I want to. That's it. That's all.
I love it. Man. How do you, so let's say, Eric, I'm just starting my podcast and I want you on my show. And let's say we don't know each other. What advice would you give me for reaching out to you? What would I say in an email? What's the best way to approach you? Because I'm sure I get these. You've been podcasting longer than I have. You probably get emails at least once a day, maybe more, of people wanting to be on your show. They want your audience. They want to be on your stage, but the opposite. Let's say I want to reach out for you to be on my show, but I'm brand new. I'm a little bit intimidated because I've been following you for a while, and I have 5 listeners maybe now. And so how am I going to entice you to come to my show when I only have 5 listeners?
Yeah. Well, when you're starting out, I would probably start with lower hanging fruit, right? So like get some people who you think you can probably get, whether they're friends or family or somebody like that. I started with people at my church because mine is the spiritual journey. So there were just people I would run into and I would just say, hey, I'm starting this thing. Would you be interested in sharing about that? So don't be afraid to do that. But if you're going to reach out to somebody that you're interested in, one thing I think that is neglected is talking to publishers. So look for somebody who you want to talk to. Look for when they're publishing books. If they start talking on social or in their media that they're going to be publishing a book and they're getting a team together, whatever, say yes. And then go out and reach out to the publisher and say, hey, are they booking interviews? Because I'd love to get them. The other thing you can do, you can always reach out to, I reached out to a woman who I follow on Twitter. She published a book last year and I just didn't hop on the train fast enough, I don't think, to get her on my show, but I reached out to her on Twitter and she said, yeah, let's do it. Here's my email address. Send me an email and we'll get it booked. But what I did in that conversation is I said, hey, I've been following you for a while. I really like your message about this. That resonates with my audience in this way because, and would you be interested to come and share with me and my audience? And she said, I'd love to do it. So it really doesn't take that much, but you got to demonstrate that you know their work and why they're a fit for your audience.
Good. Yeah, there's people like I know Amy Porterfield just launched a book.
Yep.
Russell Brunson, when he was launching, I think one of the most recent, I don't remember which one it was, he got on tons of podcasts. And I got an email, if I wanted to be on the list to potentially have him on there. I didn't do it. But
what?
I should have probably, yes, for sure.
What are you doing?
But yeah, that was my mistake. But those are opportunities like that when they are in book promotion mode, you'll be able to talk to somebody that you probably normally would not have the time to come on your show.
And then the key is to try to think of at least one question that everybody else isn't going to ask them, right? That no one else is going to ask them. So think of one thing that resonates with your message, with whatever your show is about, that you can draw out of that person that is different and unique. And that then becomes a thing that you can share, market, that makes them want to share because they're not just saying the same thing over and over again.
That's so good. Then you'll stand out for sure.
That's right.
That's good. What are
so I had can I give you an example of that?
Absolutely.
So I interviewed a guy named Skye Jethani, who is on the Holy Post with Phil Vischer, and he actually wrote one of the best books I've ever read on Christian discipleship called With. But after I got done speaking to him doing our interview, he actually said he goes, thank you for this interview because it was a lot more biographical about him and kind of his experiences, which is what I do, versus just we still talked about the stuff about his book that was coming out at the time. We still went over that, but we did it in a different way that I think was more interesting. So if you can get that kind of a response,
yes,
you're doing it right.
Yeah, that's so good. What tips do you have for somebody that's saying, man, I know that I probably should start a podcast, but it sounds like a lot of work and I know the answer is just to hire you to help me out. That's what I would do, because I don't want to learn all the technical stuff.
Right.
But let's just tips for getting started if they're thinking about doing it.
Well, so I have this kind of 5. I went to seminary, so I have to alliterate. I get these 5 M's. I'm contractually obligated. So I think about it this way. And actually, the things that most people start with is like the mechanical tips. What do I need? I got to buy a microphone. I got to figure out where to put it on the internet and all these kinds of things. That's the easy part. And so I turn this into I think of it like a house, right? When you're building a house. So I don't know if you've ever built a house, but maybe you've seen it. So here's the 5 M's. The first one is actually mindsets. And the mindset is your foundation. So it's the place where everything rests on. If the foundation is not good, you're in trouble. So part of your foundation needs to be, even if this is hard, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do the work. I'm going to show up. For me, I had decided, remember I told you how I had some of those things that didn't do so well before I did my podcast. One of the things I had to decide was that every Monday there was going to be an episode of Halfway There, no matter what. No matter how many downloads I got, no matter how discouraged I was, there was going to be an episode of Halfway There until it was successful. And that's what I did. There were a lot of Sunday nights where after watching Sunday Night Football, I'd have to sit down and work on my podcast until 11:30 at night. I had to be at work at 6 a.m. So that was not a lot of sleep for Eric. And sometimes Eric can be grumpy, like if I can talk about myself in the third person like that. So, but that choice, right, that mindset of I'm going to publish a episode was really important. So there's things like that you have to have in your mindset.
Yep.
The second one is message. And we talked a little bit about this, but you need to know your value proposition. What is it? Who are you helping? What are you helping them do? And what's the transformation they're going to get as a result? You guys know that. You got to know that. And if you don't, then you're in trouble, because the message is the framing of the house, right? So it's the thing that everything else hangs on. So you've got your value proposition, you've got your ways that you help people, and you try to figure that out. Do you have to have that figured out before you start? No. It can come into focus as you're going. In fact, sometimes people will change whatever. It will develop. The ways I talk about the spiritual journey today are very different than the ways I did in 2016, but that's because I developed it as I went, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Next one, the third one is mechanics. And this is where everybody wants to start. Get a decent microphone. At a minimum, one USB microphone is all you need. You can get onto Zoom. You can get onto Zencastr. I think is even free. They have a free plan. And a USB microphone, you can record both video and audio super easy and in high quality. It's not that tough.
Rough price point? Because I know people look at those USB mics and go, oh, I'm not going to spend $400, $500.
No, you don't have to. So like I have the Heil PR40, which is like $350 or so. You can go, bigger even if you want, but you don't have to. There's really good mics for $100 if you on Amazon. And a lot of those come with all the fancy stuff, the boom arm and the stuff that makes you feel like you're doing you're real pro. I'm gonna get here's the thing, you never actually outgrow that, by the way. My boom keeps like slipping sometimes when I'm doing conversations, which is really irritating. So I want to get one that attaches to the ceiling, and so I can just stick it up there and then pull it down.
Awesome.
Only because I think it's cool, right?
That would be cool.
You never outgrow that. But and the mechanics. So the mechanics. I'm going to go back to my house analogy. Your mechanics are the stuff in your house that make it work, right? So like your plumbing, your HVAC, your electrical, hopefully you set it up once and you forget about it. You never have to look at it again. It's a problem if you have to worry about your plumbing, right? Like you don't want that. So, but you can upgrade it at some point. You can put in the tankless water heater instead of the regular, so you can get new things if you want, but you don't have to think about it all the time. You set it up once, no big deal. So let me give you the other two real quick, and then I'll let you guys jump back in. As I'm preaching, the fourth one is marketing, and I look at marketing as the curb appeal of your house. Right, it's what invites people in. It's what makes people go, "Oh, that's actually that's a place I think I'd like to hang out." And so it brings extra value, and you bring them into your different rooms, which are lined and supported by your message and your framing. And then lastly is monetization, which I think is what makes your podcast productive. And in a house, I think of it as like a rain barrel or a garden, right? Your garden is what makes it productive. You can bring forth stuff that can help sustain your family. So that's the way I think about it. That's my, front to back. And don't start with the microphone, you need that. Don't take forever on your message. You don't have to have it perfect, but make sure you have it down and you're at least close on what you want to say, because that's going to inform a lot of other things like your format and the questions you ask and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's so good. Do you think, I think you said before we hit record that there's 450,000 active podcasts according to that Industry Insights place?
Yeah.
Do you think, I mean, if you had to guess, maybe they even have stats for this. Wonder how many of them are being monetized either through sponsorship or the host has a business on the back end, like a course or a membership like you do? Just curious if you...
It's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure, who knows? I think it's the goal of most people who start podcasts is somehow to monetize, but not everybody. And that's one thing I've run into with Christian podcasters. A lot of times it's a ministry for them, and so they're really just trying to get a message out of somebody that they're experiencing a circumstance that they want to help solve. But it just depends. For
ministry, let's talk about that for a second. Let's say that I have a ministry. Let's say I'm a pastor, or just maybe I'm a pastor and I'm putting my sermons out on the podcast, and that's all we're doing. But maybe a better question to ask is, what do you think people in ministry, how could they be leveraging their podcast better? What could they be doing differently from what you see to either increase listenership or grow an email list? Or what are some of the things you see that ministry has some room for improvement in regard to podcasting?
Yeah, so podcasting is the new tape ministry for a lot of churches where they're recycling their sermons, right? Yeah. Which is fine. I'm actually really a big fan of that. I think you should do that. I think it's really valuable. People who can't make it, those series, I guess, don't really tend to get a lot of downloads, but that's okay. But you want to have it out there. I understand why you do that. Here's what I would encourage more churches to do and more pastors to do. I think they need to understand that people are being discipled right now. Like if they're spending 2 hours at your church on a Sunday morning, and maybe even, let's say, give them 1 hour during the week when they have a small group, or 2 hours during the week. So let's say 4 hours total during the week. Well, there's a whole lot of other time where they're consuming vast amounts of content that is actually also shaping their worldview, shaping the way they see what's happening in the world.
Yes. I
think there's some problems depending on what they're listening to, right? That may or may not be valuable.
Yeah.
So think about that, and then think about what else you could do that would, in a podcast, that would be valuable for them. And I think beyond shooting the breeze with your pastor, right? So there's a show, I was just recording an episode with them a couple weeks ago called Why God Why. It's out of a church in Buffalo, New York, where they take why questions that they hear from their congregation and they ask them. So the one I was on was, why am I not growing in my church right now? That's great. That's a perfect question for me because I talk about the spiritual journey. Let's discuss that. And so we did. There may be something, it may be different for every local congregation, but to think about it in terms as part of your ministry, to think about the internet. Like I think for a long time, the thing was, well, the internet's not real, right? What happens in this building is real, but what happens on the internet is not real. But here's the thing. Guess what? The internet is comprised of people, just like everybody everywhere else, right? So people are interacting, even though we put our best selves forward. People are interacting with one another, and you can't tell me that's that much different than what happens on a Sunday morning in a church service. We think about that and fill that up with good content, with gospel content, with something that encourages your people to follow Jesus regardless of what the rest of their life looks like.
That's good. So for you, it might be a separate, like if you were if I was a pastor and you were consulting me, you'd say, go ahead and do your tape ministry, put your sermons out there, do that, but then have a separate podcast around a different topic like that church in Buffalo is doing.
Yeah, it could even be, you can do that if that makes sense for you. It could even be in the same feed where you put it on another one every week.
Okay.
Where you, let's say a pastor sits around and says, okay, here's what I'm going to do. We're going to talk about the themes of that sermon, of this passage with somebody. So then they could either ask another pastor on staff, they could ask a congregation member, they could ask somebody who's shown some interest in, like, I'm really curious about that topic. Great, let's go talk about it. And then you have this conversation. Remember, you can edit anything. So somebody says something that you're like, that's kind of not exactly, I don't know if we want to say that. Take it out. But don't be afraid of that. And try to have that conversation with somebody. You can, again, we talked about the networking possibilities also. I mean, think about the people that you can, actually Peter Englert, who's the guy who does the Why God Why podcast, said to me on my show, he uses the podcast as a way to expose the people in his congregation to people out there who otherwise they wouldn't have the chance to see, because it would cost $20,000 to bring somebody in to come and speak to their church, but they'll do the podcast for free, right? So they'll show up and they'll share, and then he's using that again as a discipleship tool to teach his people. It's a creative way to think, and I really love that.
Man, so many different ways. It could be just go deeper on the Sunday sermon, or talk to somebody, get their opinion, and just have a side conversation about that topic. I love it. Stephen,
what you're doing when you do that is you're teaching your people that it's okay to have those conversations. You're asking them to have them. You're inviting them to do it so that they can actually continue to grow and to think. And I would say creation is key to growth.
That's good. Stephen, do you want to jump in here?
Well, I just think this is fascinating. I love this concept of like, say your suggestions as if we were pastors, say your suggestions as if we were missionaries. Because I think this is another part of this podcast, is to have these creative ideas. I think it's more than just like, hey, do this and get this income, do this and get this result. It's like, here are ideas. We're trying to expose people to more ideas. But I think, as I'm on this journey too of understanding, it's just like, I wouldn't have thought a podcast of anything other than just a marketing ploy. Throw it out there. I think what you said about churches I don't even know if they see it like that, but you correctly categorized the way they're using podcasts is the way they used to use their tape ministry. And then you just go, but it's so much more. Why not bring in people? Even the fact that you said you can get people that would normally charge a church a bunch of money to come and speak for is like mind-blowing. Like, I don't know. I feel like the more churches I talk to, the more missionaries I talk to, it's just like they have very limited thinking. But I think these conversations that we are having get me excited. I want to spread these ideas out to more people. So if you are a pastor, I think it's worth trying some of these. And it, like you said, it doesn't have to cost a bunch of money. And I could almost bet the house that the church, big or small, has all the equipment needed to do all of this. They have the messaging, like they have at least 4, if not all 5 of the M's, like right there. It's just using the tools slightly differently. I think this is why I'm most excited to just have more of these conversations, to go like, what can we do? It's not just we want to show you exactly how to get an end result. It's, here are some creative things. Take these and use them. We want to help you with just these ideas, these creative solutions. But I think the kingdom problem that churches are having is they're unable to get their message out there. But the podcast, they are just using it as like, this is our sermon, we're going to put it out there. That's great. But exactly what you said, it's not the best thing, and you're missing a lot of opportunity if you're just doing that.
Oh man, I could not agree more. So what's happened is the world has changed, right? Like,
amen.
We are in the middle. We haven't seen a seismic shift like this since the invention of the printing press. So the church is still behind. The American evangelical church is always 20 to 40 or 50 years behind.
Amen.
Right? In terms of everything. But here's the reality. In terms of pedagogy and how we teach people, we're probably 100 years behind. So that is an issue. We're still trying to teach people as if information is not freely available. There was a great article. I mentioned Skye Jethani once already. He's one of my heroes. I'm glad I got to talk to him about that. He wrote an article. I actually asked him about this in my interview with him in 2019, which right before the pandemic, like November 2019, it came out. So he was so like spot on. Probably didn't know that though. It was called The Case Against Sermon-Centric Sundays. He's a preacher. He's like, I hate to admit this, but the reality is people can get information anywhere today. I could listen to the best preachers because they're all on podcasts now. I could listen to anyone. Why do I need to go listen to my guy at my church, right? I don't. But what I can't get there, now he advocated for a more like communion-centric kind of a service. There are certain experiences that I can't get online. I can't get information. So thinking about the Sunday service as more of an experience, which, let's be honest, this is what movie theaters have to do. This is what restaurants have to do. This is any place because of the digital age, any place that used to trade on, even like a car dealer, right? They have to have a great experience because the knowledge, I can't just show up and expect them to educate me on the price. I already know the price, right? That's the way it works now. The knowledge is not gatekeep anymore. Get kept. I don't know what the word is, but
I'm not coming here for that basic information. That basic information is out there already. You got to do something different.
So same thing with churches. You just have to create a different kind of environment. So there's another church that I'm aware of in Indiana that they have a meeting every Sunday night where they actually have a discussion. Well, they do books, they do a passage of scripture, whatever. And the whole thing is designed to be like, just show up and let's talk. Used to be like a Sunday night service. Remember how people used to have like the same thing Sunday night and Sunday morning? Mm-hmm. They turned it into this thing and they have people show up to like, okay, let's have a conversation. Let's discuss, let's disagree a little bit and see where that gets us and what we can kind of hammer out. That's way more conducive to growth than just sitting and listening to someone else tell me what I should think. And this is why I'm not a preacher today, because I wasn't very good at it.
Oh my gosh, this is so
What's
good.
crazy is you're probably impacting more people now than you were if you were just pastoring a church. But I think with your skills and abilities, if you were to go back to pastor a church, it wouldn't just be your congregation in that room. You would still be reaching a bunch more people because you understand the tools and you can leverage the tools.
I've thought about that all the time because people will say to me things like when I talk about this stuff, they're like, when are you going to start a church? Like, no, don't do that to me. I don't want to. Not interested. But then I think about it and I'm like, well, what would that look like? And it would have to look very, very different. I would not preach every week. I would not. I would maybe do it in a way that I could get some feedback or people could have discussions. And it would be more of a large scale seminar where we're all discussing. I could maybe do that and get behind that. And then there would have to be a number of other things, but yeah, I think it's got to change. It's going to have to change. That is going to change in the next, I would say 40 or 50 years, but we just have to. This is the way we help people learn.
That's awesome. So tell us about, I want to hear about your membership, the Christian Podcasters Association members. What do they get? And let's talk about the podcast network for a few minutes too, and then we'll let you go. So what are you, you've got the free Facebook group of 3,200 people, but you also got an extra level of service for those that want to go a little bit deeper.
Yeah. So the free Facebook group is for people who just want to connect with other Christian podcasters. And so they do that. They help each other. And there's a lot of good stuff going on in there. Also, there's places for people to say they want to guest, things like that. Yeah. But the membership, I started that because I really wanted to go deeper with a few people. And so that is every Tuesday night we get together and we have either one or two conversations. I invite a guest to come in and share something with us that will help us sharpen our skills. So last night we had a guy named Jeff C. who does video. I met him at Podfest also. He does video stuff. And I've kind of known of him for a while, but never had a chance to meet him until in Florida. And he taught us all about video. Like, here's what you got to do. It's not as hard as you think. And he gave us all that kind of stuff. And so I'll bring in people like that. And we ask our questions and we take the challenge and we, see what happens from there. And then the other weeks, every other week, we have group coaching. And so I'll just kind of open the floor and say, who wants to be on the spotlight? You can bring an issue, bring a question, bring something that's really perplexing you. And I will either answer it myself if I know something, or I often leave it open to the group so that people can speak into it. And, we have a bunch of great people who, even though they're not coaches professionally, they should be, because they can ask great questions. They can dive into that. Yeah. And so we just all kind of support each other. The community, I know people come for like information and like they want that, but the community and the accountability are brilliant, and I really do love it. So that's $49 a month, but I think what you get in those meetings is amazing. Oh, I didn't even mention all those videos that we make of people. You get access to those as well in the library.
Yeah. Have you had a live event of your Christian Podcasters Association?
We did one in 2021. We did one called Christian Podcast Summit. Okay. And that was on social media.
Yeah.
And it was, so we did, which is when I was actually trying to get a hold of Jeff C, because he has this thing called Manly Pinterest Tips, which I thought was pretty cool. Because, I was trying to find something like, teach me about Pinterest that's not about,
Right.
makeup and whatever. So I didn't connect with him until this year. But yeah, we did that in 2021, January. It was fun. It was really great. I think I'd like to do a little bit differently next time. And I'm actually thinking about it in a couple different ways. I want to do a community day, which I told you guys about before, where we have 3 or 4 people instead of like 2 whole days of content. Let's dive really deep on one subject.
Mhm.
And then the other thing I'm working on that I think is kind of a zig when other people are zagging is I want to have a podcasters retreat where we don't even talk about what to do.
Yeah.
Let's just get together. I can coach or, encourage people, but
Mhm.
mostly we're just going to be together. We're going to maybe do some worship and some, just
Cool.
encouragement. And I think it's just a whole different thing than what you get at some of those conferences.
Yeah. I love it. That's a great idea. Keep us posted on that.
I'm working on it. I will.
So we came to the PodFest we're thinking about, hey, we're going to start a podcast network. And then we sit down with you, and you kind of had that in the back of your mind. So we just decided to join forces with you and do it together. So tell people what a podcast network is, because Stephen and I are kind of still learning ourselves.
Even though you started one.
Try to explain what a podcast network is, why people should be a part of one, and why, who might be a fit for us. Because there's people listening right now that we would love to have join our network. I think this is an easy sell because it doesn't cost anything.
Right.
If they want to pay you, we eventually could pay you. So talk about that.
Well, that's the brilliant thing. So a network, usually for podcasters, you have to pay for your hosting. You have to pay for a number of other things. Getting to monetization can be difficult, particularly with ads, because you have to have so many downloads before you can really make any kind of real money with advertisers, because they pay on a certain basis. We're like per 1,000 downloads, right? So if you're not getting 10,000 downloads per episode, it's tough to go, oh, okay, how much am I going to make? So what network does, now there's different kinds, but we'll talk about what we're going to do, is brings us together as a conglomerate, right? So we're like all on under the same banner. And then all of us, we can put together our downloads and you can have ads. So the beautiful part is, because we're able to monetize across the network, the cost to the podcaster for hosting can be 0. And then the ads can help monetize, and we can split that with the podcaster so that they can monetize much more quickly than they otherwise would. Now, it's still going to be dependent on your downloads, but
Sure.
the advantage of the network, which is then we can actually advertise your show on my show, or my show on these 4 or 5 other shows, so that we can collectively, rising tide lifts all boats. We can all go that way. I have a friend who's on another network, and his podcast got advertised on the 2nd episode of a really popular show. In 2021, it was one of the top shows, number 1 or number 2 in the religion and spirituality category, and sometimes on the main, like, all podcast charts.
Yeah.
He got his show advertised on that, and it like quadrupled his downloads, right? So there's power there if we can, lift all the boats.
Totally. So somebody who's brand new could go through your training, hire you to help them start their podcast, and join our network right away if they wanted to. What type of people are we looking for the network?
Yeah, so there's really only 2 requirements that I have. Is you have to be committed to publishing regularly, and we've had a little bit of debate about what does that mean exactly. Personally, if you're willing to show up and I would love to have weekly shows, but if you're a couple times a month, I'm okay with that. But you got to be committed to publishing regularly and for a long time. And then the other thing is, I think you just have to be a Christian, preferably. My view, I think if you can affirm the Nicene Creed, which gets a little bit in the theological weeds, but that's good. That's a very basic level of Christianity. If you can do that, then I think we can be friends and we can support what you do.
That's a good distinction, because it doesn't have to be like a Christian podcast like yours. Like,
that's right.
My Streams of Income show fits this because I'm a believer, and I talk a lot about my faith, but it's primarily business. So if somebody listening, you're a believer, you want to be a part of a network like this, your show can be on any topic. It doesn't really matter so much that.
Right. Well, see, that's actually what I love and I say this all the time to my podcasters, is they're bringing the gospel to bear on their niche, right?
Yes,
so
good.
so like one lady in my group, Paula Chamberlain, has a show about quilting, right? Somebody else has a show about leadership. There's all these different ones, and based on their skills, their background, but the gospel runs throughout all of them, just in different ways. And that's what I care about. So I think the network will reflect that for sure.
So good. You know what? That lady with the quilting show, let's say that she decided, you know what, I'm going to go straight away and just gonna change my podcast to call it about, I Love Jesus podcast. You know what? She'd probably lose some people. And the fact that she has a quilting podcast is going to attract people that may never, ever, ever listen to a podcast if it was,
or go close to a church,
or go close, or even exactly, or walk on the same sidewalk as a church. But will listen to her podcast and may get saved as a result of that,
or plant a seed. Like, you just don't know. Absolutely. So she doesn't always talk about her faith, but she says every quilt has a story, which I think is really brilliant insight into the quilting world. Yeah, she can, but when she does interview believers, she doesn't hide it, and she brings it up, and so then there is this kind of, it's just part of the life, but which I think is the way the gospel should be.
Like, and trust her because she's a quilter and they're in the same niche, and that opens the door for her to essentially speak into them. That gives her that in that person's life because they trust her in her quilting niche, which is so cool.
Exactly, it's amazing, and that's why I'm so passionate about content, about creating, about being, a person who's willing to put your passion online to share with other people. If you're a believer, you can bring the gospel to bear, which means you're bringing the gospel to the world.
That's good. So guys, if you're interested in the network, for now, I guess email me, ryan@ryanrieger.com. Where can people find you if they want to do your podcast tours? We didn't talk about that, but that's where I want to hire, if I'm promoting a book, for example, and I want to be on a bunch of shows, I can actually hire you to get me on shows, which is amazing. But where's the portal for all things Eric?
Yeah, best place to go is ericnevins.com. You can find, there's a contact button there. Just hit that contact button. I'll get that. And I will be happy to respond. You can always hit me on all the socials. You'll find me. You just search Eric Nevins.
Wonderful. Eric, thank you so much. This is awesome. Look forward to working with you more, man.
Yes,
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
You've been listening to Streams of Income with self-help author Ryan Rieger. From right here in the Dallas Metroplex, Ryan teaches several entrepreneurial courses and group coaching programs to students all over the world. Be sure to listen next week at the same time for Streams of Income with Ryan Rieger.